Hello once again and welcome to CSIT 208, Multimedia and Web Design. This is our 9th session and we are going to have a demonstration on HTML. In the previous slides, we have seen how HTML works, from tables to underlining a piece of text to making a piece of text bold and all the formatting you can do on the text. This session, we are going to do a more practical demonstration of HTML so that you appreciate HTML from a live perspective. So as we have seen, HTML has a definite structure. So we are going to go through the creation of a very simple and basic web page. Now we all remember the website structure that we saw in the previous session. So we are going to do that. We're going to start by the creation of the HTML tag. So you open your angle brackets and you do HTML and you close your angle brackets. You do another one, HTML, but this time around having a / just before the HTML. Now, to make your code readable, it is good to indent your code as I have done. So we have the head. We have the closing of the head, which means that it will have a / before the head. And inside the head, we have the title. Now that is going to contain the information displayed on the title bar of our web page. Now after the head, we have the body. And then we close the body as well. So as we can see, this is the standard basic structure of a website. We have the opening and closing of HTML. We have the opening and closing of head, opening and closing of title, opening and closing of body. Now we realize that the title has no content yet, and none of them have any attributes. Now what we want to call or give to our title? Let's call it My First Web Page. So now let's save this. We create a special folder for ourselves on the desktop called CSIT 208. Now inside of it, we save our file. Now we can give it any name, but give it names that will make more meaning to you as to what the content of the page is. So for this purpose, I'll call it First Page. As one word, first page. Now I need to supply an extension to tell the system what kind of file it is. Now with the piece of editor I am using, I can just click on the Save As Type drop down and then select the type of file I am working with. So I'll go down and I'll look for HTML. And there it is. So you can see that it automatically gives me the HTML extension. You could either use .htm or .html. So I'll just go with the .html. Now if you are using normal Notepad, your Save As Type, you select all files and you manually type the .html as the extension of your web page. So once this is done, you see that the color scheme of the page we are creating has changed. What do? Let's go to our desktop and then open our CSIT 208 folder. We realize that we have first page and the document type is what? Firefox HTML document. We double click on it and you will see that it will open in a web browser. Now this is what we were talking about. You can see that the title of the web browser, this particular page says My First Web Page, which is what you wrote within the title tag of your HTML file. Now what do we want to do next? We want to do something extra to our HTML. First of all, we learned about colors. Now let's apply a color to the background of our web page. So on the body tag, we specify an attribute BG color. Now, note here that color is spelled without a U because we are using the American standard, and that is the standard that is used for web pages. So we say BG color equal to, and we supply a particular color, let's say red. Now we save this, go back to our web page, and then we refresh. Once we refresh, we realize that our website or web page has background color red. Now, you might not have an exhaustive list of all web colors by name, which makes it difficult to use names as color representations, especially when you would want to have different shades at different intensities. So instead of using the name of the color, we specify either an RGB color or a hexadecimal. So for the slide containing the RGB system, we learned about the Dusty Rose color, which was a #FF6699. Let's see how that looks. So we save, and then we refresh. And this is the Dusty Rose color. Now we go into our body and add a little text. Let's use the famous text, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Now after saving, we go back to our web browser and then we refresh. We realize that that text is written on the web page. Now, as we were saying during our slides, we were saying that you can leave so much space and put a heading here, say heading. And we save. When we go back and we refresh our web page, we realize that they are together. Heading, the quick brown fox jump over the lazy dog. It did not respect the space that we have left when we were writing our code. Instead, we have to use HTML to do this. So how do we go about it? For a particular heading, as we saw during the slides, you can use the tag H1 to H6, with H1 being the biggest and H6 being the smallest. So we wrap our heading around an H tag like this. And then after the heading, we do the same thing, but this time around with a / before the H1. Now when we save this and we go to our browser, we realize that we have a heading that is standing by itself and it is big. Let's change H1 to H3 and we'll realize a difference in size of the heading. I hope we appreciate it now. So then you can try with other numbers between 1 and 6 to see the sizes you come up with. So my heading will be my message. Now, assuming I wanted to write something else after this, and I leave a space and I type, "This is good news." As we saw with the heading, it is going to put all of them together. In order to separate them, we will use what we call the P tag, which is the paragraph tag. So we keep each one in a separate paragraph. So I will wrap the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog in a P tag. So before it and then right after it, I have my P, which is the closing. When I save this and I refresh, I realize that I have my message. I have one paragraph being the quick fox jumps over the lazy dog, and then I have "This is good news." So this helps in formatting your text for your web pages. You can go ahead and then try with other things. So I put this around another paragraph. Now, there are instances where you would want to add emphasis to a particular word or phrase. Let's say jumps. You can do an I tag around jumps, meaning that right after jumps, you do the closing tag, which is supposed to take a / just before the I. Now you can see that we have the quick brown fox, but jumps has been what? Italicized. Maybe we want to make dog bold. You put the B tag around it, and then you close the B tag. We refresh this page, and we realize that dog is bold. Now, there are other tags that you can use to accomplish the same purpose. For example, this is good news. I could wrap it around the EM tag. And we realize that it performs the same action to the text as did the I. In the same way, we can have another piece of text saying, "This is very good." Instead of using B, let's try strong as a tag around "this is very good." When we refresh our web page after saving, we realize that we have "this is very good," which is bold. So you can have instances where somebody decides to use a B and someone decides to use strong. But note here that the newer way of doing it, or the most current way of doing it, is using the strong tag. We move on to other tags. Let's see how a list works. Let's say there are a list of courses for a particular semester in IT. We give the title "List of Semester Courses." Now, in our body, we can specify a particular heading of a very decent size. So we'll do H4, and inside of it we just write "list of courses." Now let's start with the ordered list. As I mentioned during the ordered list session, we have OL as ordered lists, and each of the individual items is an LI. So what is going to happen is we can have LI for CSIT 206, which is IT programming. Then we close our LI. Remember, when you open a tag, you close it. It is best practice to close it immediately after you open, so that you do not get confused with so many opening and closing of tags. Then we do another one for CSIT 208, which is this particular course, Multimedia and Web Design. After saving this, if we view it in our web browser, we realize that we have an ordered list, numbered 1, 2, and so on. So if I add another one, automatically say CSIT 314, and let's call it Database Management Systems. And we realize that it will automatically order it in increasing order from 1 and above. Maybe I do not want this order, but I want a particular kind of ordering. On my ordered list, I'll add type and specify I, as we saw in our slides. Now this changes the ordering, although it is ordered, it changes the naming of the ordering from 1, 2, 3 to the Roman numerals I. Let's add one more and see it's changed to IV. Let's say 414, and then we call it compiling techniques. I hope we are all okay with this. Now let's just change the same piece of code to an unordered list. To have an unordered list, instead of the OL, we use the tag UL, meaning unordered list. So we realize that we have bulleted points since we are using the unordered list UL. Now we proceed to create tables. Very, very important. Now let's create a simple table. We know how table is created from our slides. You use the table tag. So first of all, I open and I close my table tag. And I specify my first row of data called TR. And I have to close that TR. Now inside of that row, I need to specify my cells. So the number of cells I require within my table row, I write them as TDs. So I can have a TD and close a TD. And I can have as many of them as I want within my TR. Now I have just created one row, but inside of it, I have created now 2 columns. If I do it again, 3 columns, 4 columns, and 5 columns. So this is a table with 1 row, 5 columns. So let me just name the columns, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, and finally column 5. Let's refresh this and see how it is. Now I have column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. But we do not realize that we are dealing with a table. This is because the attribute border hasn't been specified, and by default it is 0. So we go on to specify border equal to 1 for the table. We save and then we refresh. Now we see we have a table of 1 column, of 1 row, 5 columns. Now you see that the width of each of the individual cells corresponds to the size of the text contained in them. Now you can do things differently by increasing the size of the TD by giving it a width. So for the first column, let's give it a width of 150. Now we see the difference. So although the content of column 1 is limited to the text column 1, because we have specified a width for the TD, it has taken effect on the page. And we can do the same for the other columns. So I'm just going to copy width equal to 150 and then paste it across. We refresh our web page, and then we see that the width has taken effect. There are instances where you would want to align the content, because we realize that the content, column 1, column 2, column 3, up to column 5, are all left aligned. Let's assume that we want to keep column 3 in the middle. That is centered. What we do is that we give another attribute to the TD containing column 3. And we give it the attribute align. And then we specify how we want to align it. It's the center. We save. We go back to our web page. We refresh. And we realize that that particular one is centered. So you can play around with this and then familiarize yourself with the tags, especially the table tag, and see how it works by playing around with the attributes as well. The best way to learn HTML is to actually do it. Assuming I have another row that I want to do, I need to create a different TR. Now, since these two TRs are independent, for us to align them very well, this TR must also contain an equal number of TDs corresponding to the first TR. So I need to have 5 TDs inside of this TR. And I'll say next row, column 1, next row, column 2, and so on. I'll take the alignment center from this tag. And here we have it. So we realize that for the TD of column 3 in the first row, we supplied alignment to be center. And we have the text centered. But since we didn't do the same for the second row, we realized that next row, column 3, is left aligned, which is the default. Now let's take away the last column of the second row. We realize that the first row has 5 columns, and then the second row has only 4 columns. Let's see how the display is. We realize that it is empty. It doesn't have anything. But maybe that is genuinely how your website is supposed to be laid out. But you want the 4th column of the second row to span 2 columns. That is when you use co-span. So this particular TD, you specify a co-span of 2. Meaning that that single column should span multiple columns. And in this case, 2 columns. So we see that there's no more line between 4 and the end. But now we are having column 1, new row column 1, new row column 2, new row column 3, and the new row column 4 corresponds to the column for both column 4 and column 5 of the initial row. And I hope we appreciate this. And you can do the same thing for row span. Now we proceed to look at HTML form elements. As we mentioned, to create a form, you need to wrap it around a form tag. So we create a form. The very important attributes it takes are the action, which is where the form data will be sent. For now, we leave it empty, meaning it will send it to the same page. The method. that it is going to use to send the data. Now, there are various types. There's post, there's get, there's put, there's delete. But we're going to deal with post for now. And then we are finally going to close our form tag. So let's do something like first name, which is a label. And then to create an input tag, you do input. Now for a text box, the type equal to text. You give it a unique name to identify it, say F name. And you are good to go for now. But there are other attributes like ID, class that we'll be looking at subsequently. Let's view this on a web page. And we see first name comes with a text box where we can type to collect information from users. We can do another one for last name. Also of input type text, and we give it L name, a unique name to uniquely identify that text box. Now when we look at it carefully, it is just going to continue till it is done. If we wanted to break to a new line, between the two, we put a BR, which is the break, which will break the line and cause it to move to the next line. Now, have we seen that the alignment is not too good, especially if this happened to be something like just surname? Because of the formatting of HTML, it is not going to be properly aligned. Now, getting to the latter part of this session, we are going to use tables that we've seen here already to align our form elements. So I'll just do a couple of other form elements, then we can proceed to align our form elements using a table. The next one I'll look at is radio buttons. So I'll do input, type equal to radio, name equal to gender, which is just a unique identification for the input type. And then I'll say male. And then I'll do another one for female. Now remember, I mentioned that the name for the radio buttons, if they belong to the same category, should have the same name, should be the same. So over here, we are going to have a radio button. If you select male, female will not be active. If you select female, male will not be active. And that is a radio button. And if I want to move that also to the next line, I put a BR, which is the break tag, right after surname. Then we'll do the final two, which is the select tag, which gives us a drop down. So assuming the gender, you didn't want to use radio buttons and you wanted to use a drop down, you can do gender. This time around, you do a select tag and you close your select tag. And you have option tags inside of them. So you do option, you close your option, and then you have one option for male, one option for female. So this gives us a drop down, and we can select either male or female in the drop down. If you feel that it is too small, you can increase the width, because this is taking the default width of the content that is placed within it. If it had very long content, an example of I do not know my gender. You see it has increased the size, and we can see I do not know my gender. But you can also specify a fixed width with an attribute, as we have done with the other elements. One other thing we learned was the max length. Let's say we are giving our name a max length of 8. We realize that if we refresh the page and we are typing a first name, after the 8th name, anything you type is not going to go again. There's also another field for taking password, and that is the password field. And similarly, we just specify an input with type equal to password. We give it a name. We can call it PASWD. Now, on our web page, once that appears, if you type inside of it, you realize that the text you have typed is hidden. Then finally, we look at a button. For the submit button, we use input, type equal to submit. And we give it a value, which is the text that will be written on the button. Let's say click me with an exclamation. When we refresh, we have a button that says click me. Now we see how poorly organized our page is. Now let's use our understanding of tables to define a very, very elegant form based on all these inputs we have here. So I'll do several rows of 2 columns each. The first column of each row will contain the label, and then the second column will contain the input tag. So we will put first name in the first column of the first row, and then the corresponding input tag in the second column of the first row. We do the same thing for surname. So I'll need another row for the gender. And we are going to use our radio buttons as we have defined. We're going to have a password field as well, so we create another row. I'll just copy, paste, and edit. And finally, we'll have a submit button. Now we're going to create the TR, but since that button wants to stand alone, or we want that button to stand alone, we are going to use the call span that we learned. We are going to just have one TD. All the previous rows have two TDs. So if you are going to have one TD, it means that you're going to have a call span of 2. And that is where we're going to place the button. Now we put the table that is helping us format our form. And we have a beautiful form, properly organized, first name, surname, gender, password. And what you can even do to it, to make it even more elegant, is to right align each one of them. So we give align right attribute to all the first columns of each of the rows. It is worth noting that the better your understanding of the attributes, the better layout you can come up with. This brings us to the end of the 9th session, where you have learned how to practicalize all the things you learned in the previous sessions as an introduction to HTML. Thank you.